So
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, the intent was to move those to a quarterly. So next month wouldn't be that quarterly or next week, but we are happy to have staff here if you have a particular
I have
question.
a couple of things I'll bug them about afterwards.
Okay.
Thanks.
Perfect.
All right, if that's all from the commission, I'll hand it over to you for the director's report.
Thank you so much, Madam President, Commission. Regarding today's agenda, item 2 on the consent agenda, we are going to ask that you remand back to staff indefinitely for further review. There were some interesting legal terms that came up at the last second that we found out about yesterday. And so we are going to take a deeper dive into that before we bring that to you for approval. All right. Well, today we have a short director's report, primarily because we want to leave some time for to recognize the birthday of Commissioner McKinney yesterday. Special day for him. We do have a Boston cream pie that Stacy tracked down for you, which I hear is a favorite of yours. So we have that today that we'll enjoy in the break prior to the full commission meeting. As always, we continue to focus our efforts on building together, building safe, and building more. Today, as I thought about this last week and thought about what our brand is and what does that mean of connecting you to more. Really, connecting you to more is the vision that we have, and the how is the building together, building safe, and building more. And I just wanted to add that and highlight that, recognizing that really is our focus, is connecting people to all the different things that they want to get to. Just a couple highlights here regarding projects and activities that have been ongoing. So first of all, I wanted to visit with you a little bit about chip seal. We are winding down our chip seal activities, at least the initial activity of chip seal, of laying down the chips. We will be complete with that over the next week. Now, there are many areas at the beginning of our chip seal season that we anticipated getting to, but I thought it was interesting with the heat that we've had this year and the smoke that we've had this year. We had, I got to remember my numbers correctly. We had 27 days of heat-related impacts to chip seal. We had to stop earlier in the day because of the heat, or we had to take more rest to keep our team safe as they're working out in the heat. So 27 days, and then we had 5 days that we were not able to chip seal at all because of how bad the air quality was. That has a huge impact in what we're able to get accomplished, especially as these would happen in the middle of the week at random times. They weren't consecutive always, and so that was an interesting impact. But the other thing about chip seal, besides being impacted by heat, it is very weather dependent, and all the components of weather impacts all components of the chip seal program. So while I have up here a picture of our paint, that is the last piece of our chip seal program, where we go in and restripe the roads after we do the chip, and then the fog, and then the sweeping, and then ultimately the paint is the final piece of this. The team, and want to highlight this as a build together today, because the team is, as they wrap this up, the staff that has been working so heavily on the chipping activity is rolling into supporting some additional sweeping to get that done faster. That we'll have additional crews out to do the fogging to make sure that gets done before the cold weather hits. And then ultimately they'll be providing some additional staffing and support for our paint crews. I really appreciate this, as this is really the goal of the reorganization we've done, and establishing an operations division, to have the team really work together through this whole process and recognize that there are many pieces. It's not just the initial laying down of the chip, but the team is working to wrap that up. As we finalize over the next week what all we're getting done, we will make sure that there is a notice out to the neighborhoods who may have been anticipating chip seal coming, that just gives them an update on how we got here and what's happened over the last year
Madam
or
President,
over this summer.
Commissioner McKinney?
Director, do we anticipate that there's going to be any kind of a shortfall in the amount of chip sealing that we're getting done relative to what was planned?
Absolutely.
How
We
much?
do. If I remember, I think it's probably 20 to 25%. Yeah, 20 to 25% of the lane miles that we anticipated getting done that we're not going to be able to get done this year.
So in a case like that, do we simply postpone that to the next year and add it to the region that's going to be chip sealed next year? How does that work?
We don't, Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, we don't. We move on to the next chip seal zone, but we are looking at other types of treatments to help address that. We're looking at slurry seal, some other types of treatments that our pavement management team looks at and says, how do we preserve these, in particular, the more major roads that we may not have gotten to? How do we address those to make sure that those roads stay in good condition when we may not be back in that area for another 7 years?
Okay, so in other words, so if we don't get to it, if we can't, any of the streets that we don't get to through those alternative modes, then we'll just have to wait another 7 years?
That is correct.
Okay.
President.
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Yes, Dave asked both questions I was going to ask, but follow-up to those is considering how much difficulty we had getting our job done with regards to this kind of maintenance during COVID. And then again for a couple of years because we couldn't find people who were willing to work. And now because of weather and other things. And I've noticed at least a couple of points or more dropping on our PCI. I think maybe that we're asking for problems down the road if we don't figure out how to catch up.
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, that is a valid perspective that staff is also looking at too. This is part of the goal of building out the U-stick yard and standing up a third chip seal crew so that we have additional staff to get more done. But with the growth of the county, it does continue to have an impact on what we're able to do on an annual basis. Really looking at the miles, we're pretty close to what we were able to do last year with one chip seal crew because of the impacts we've had from a weather and environmental perspective this year. So that is concerning to us as well. And so we are constantly looking at new treatments. That's what our pavement management team is focused on, is ensuring that we are having a positive impact, that we're doing the type of maintenance we need to, but that is an ongoing concern we have as well.
Yeah, I'm remembering at least a couple of 3 times every year for the last decade that I've been sitting here anyway, that it's been hit hard that our job one is to preserve our current assets. And so if that's still job one, then we need to fix this and figure it out fast.
Absolutely.
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe took the words out of my mouth. Job one is to maintain the assets we have. We have increased the number of lane miles enormously over the last decade. But my perception is we haven't increased our maintenance budget by that much or our capacity. We also have the knowledge of the factors of labor shortages and climate change on the type of weather conditions we're going to face in the summer, and we have to budget for that. So my question is, when we get a presentation next week on our budget, it'd be helpful to know whether we're incorporating that expanded commitment to maintaining what we have first, so that reflects that, because the area I represent didn't get fully chip sealed last year, and then the last piece that I represent isn't getting fully chipped this year, and there's folks in those neighborhoods who are concerned that it's going to be another 6 years, 7 years. So I think we really do need to shift and say, okay, our number one job is maintain the assets that the public has entrusted us to have, and not to keep adding more and more and more assets unless we have the capacity to maintain them.
Madam President, Commissioners, we really appreciate that support for that activity and that support. We will continue to take a look at the budget and how we are allocating time and resources. One of the things I will say that has had an impact in the amount that we're able to do is the go in once strategy. It's true that as we go in once, it's hard. That expands the cost of these projects significantly from what they were historically when we were just doing the roadway maintenance and the ADA improvements that are required as part of those. That does not mean that it's the wrong thing to do. It just does have an impact to the cost of these projects and the amount that we're able to get done on a regular basis. So we will continue to look at that. We're looking at how do we use our rapid project implementation. Are there some locations where we just need to go do the maintenance and get that done? And and maybe not look at everything all at once. We're looking at these, what's the best approach to this and where are those locations where it might be a little bit more sensitive, your bigger roads where you really do want to go in once and make sure that we're addressing everything in those cases. So just give you that for conversation with regards to how we approach our maintenance and that activity.
Yeah, Director, I think it might be good if we have like a work session that maybe goes into this in a little bit more detail. And, like, I'm curious how we prioritize where we're starting first in the chip seal season. I know, in our conversations, you've talked about wanting to not be chip sealing around schools when school starts. And so kind of talking about those details and then get into more detail about the impact of the deferred maintenance and how that translates to the budget and all of the pieces that you just mentioned, and kind of just, fleshing that out a little bit more, I think would be great.
Wonderful. Thank you. The next item I just wanted to bring up, this is a follow-up to the conversation we had with the commission with regards to Linder and hatchery. Thank you. I blank that every single time. Linder and hatchery. At the commission's direction, we did go in and this last weekend and had flaggers there over the weekend on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I've asked Matt Deegan, who's been working with the flaggers, to provide a brief summary of what they saw over the weekend and the impact that may have had.
Madam President, Commissioners, Matt Deegan, Manager of Safety Engineering. Yeah, so we got flaggers out there on pretty darn short notice and had them out there last weekend flagging. We went Friday, Saturday, Sunday from noon to 6 p.m. I think we can go over what we saw all 3 days. Saturday and Sunday were very similar. What we found is there's not a lot of traffic leaving hatchery, and the volumes on Linder were minimal enough to where there was not a backup on hatchery, that the flagging crews thought that there was not enough delay that even warranted the flagging aspect. So with that, we wouldn't recommend continuing to flag on the weekends. So Friday was slightly different. The volumes on hatchery were not significant, but the volumes on Linder are significant. Starting at about 3:30, it's just Linder's extremely busy, and vehicles traveling to a northbound movement, so the right out of hatchery, the flaggers thought that movement could be done without flagging, but anyone turning left, it's almost impossible just because the amount of cars coming down Linder. When they would stop to flag, it would almost immediately back up all the way from hatchery to State Street. So it's definitely, it's the volume of cars on leaving hatchery is not significant. It's just the traffic on Linder doesn't allow a lot of gaps, especially for that left turn movement.
Commissioner McKinney.
Yeah, so Director, if I may, then, right, and I drove past on the weekend and I saw the flaggers there, and I wondered why we were doing it on a weekend, because I didn't expect that the weekend would be the problem. It is weekdays, and I drive past there frequently on just any weekday afternoon, like you say, from 3 o'clock on. It's bumper to bumper on Linder Road, and a left turn is nearly impossible. So what's the plan from here? What are we going to do?
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, the The original intent of this was recognizing that Eagle Island is much busier on the weekends. And that's why when we were looking at this originally, the plan was to do weekends only. With school starting and with the end of summer, a lot of those activities have dropped, especially during the week time. Where we expect that the activities at Eagle Island will definitely be much less. The challenge we had in terms of deploying quickly is this flagging company was an add-on to one of our other contracts. We just added on some additional work for them. They are not available during the week because they're so busy with all the other construction that's going on in the county. And so we were able to add them for the weekend because that's what we originally asked them to do. I think this is an area where we need to continue to explore how do we approach this. I don't know that the flagging is the right solution to solve this because of what you're hearing from Matt. If it's during the week, we do have that immediate impact that will happen on Linder. Really what we need is the long-term solution here, which is to address the amount of capacity on Linder Road so that more vehicles can get through on a regular basis. We are looking at that in the integrated 5-year work plan, identifying when we can get that project going. We have completed a concept, identifying that road for improvement. It's just really expensive. And so maybe we need to consider, is there a piece there where we can at least add a center turn lane? That's part of the issue. The gaps, there are some gaps there. It's just when you're trying to hit 2 gaps in both directions at the same time to get out onto the road when you only have a 2-lane road, it is difficult for vehicles to get out in that situation because those gaps don't line up. And so if we can look at maybe some interim widening, adding a shoulder, we're exploring other options or proceeding with the larger project. But at least in the interim, we could look at something like that. It's just the fast solution while the construction's happening. That's the challenge we have with what do we do quickly? And right now, I'm not sure that there's a great solution in a quick format to get something done. We do anticipate that construction to be done in the next few months and Highway 44 to be open again, which will reduce significantly more the traffic on Hatchery. But there still will be the problem, so we need to look at the longer term solution of what do we do.
Right, and if I may, which would cost more, putting in an interim signal that would only trigger when vehicles approach on Hatchery Road, or some interim widening of the road to allow for turn lanes? It strikes me that, I don't know the relative costs of those two, but it strikes me that the signal might be the more cost-effective short-term solution. Have we looked at both of those cost-wise?
We have not. We'll take a look and look at the next solution.
Well, and of course, the current significant problem is of major concern, primarily because of the construction at the Eagle Island State Park.
Mm-hmm.
And that closure of the access onto State Street. And that'll apparently last till early October. So we've got a couple of months left of that. But so that's the immediate concern. And I know you're aware of that, but in any case, that's why something during this time is a concern, simply because of the possibility that with frustrated drivers at an intersection sometimes don't make good decisions. And if we have traffic that's so frustrating that no one can driver can't get out at all, that can lead to a bad situation.
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, thank you. Did you have something else you wanted to add? Okay, thank you. Either one of an interim signal or a widening would require right of way. So that's going to be a time and a cost that we would have to look at and see what's the most cost effective and timely solution we can look at there. wanting to wrap up quickly so we can cut some cake. Just wanted to highlight another project in our efforts to improve safety. This is down by Boise State. This is our second scramble intersection. This was just completed this week. We're excited to have this in place. This went in with, as well as two other LPI projects that in and around the school is where there is a lot of students crossing. You in this picture, you have one student crossing. There were actually a couple more that were there. They just got out of the picture quickly, but it's exciting to have that project complete. In the spirit of building more, I wanted to talk about a partnership that's been in discussions. The Idaho Army National Guard is looking at opportunities to practice building roads. You imagine as they get deployed, there's different activities that they have there. Our staff has been working with them on a possible project where they would pave a unpaved portion of Pleasant Valley. And just wanted to share that this conversation's ongoing with you, but thought it was a great partnership as well as an opportunity to get more done as they want to support and help build the road as well. Just a few more things to on the calendar. Kuna School District will start tomorrow, and we'll be observing and watching there. Any traffic impacts of the school starting. There is the Joint Advisory Committee walk on Pierce Park Lane on that's on Monday. I believe the 26th is a Monday. Yes, it is, because budget hearings on the 28th. So next week is the budget hearing. We do have scheduled a tour of the TOC, the work site there, scheduled for the 29th. As the commission is interested, please let us know so that we can make sure to post quorum for if we'll have that enough of you there. And then we do have the Labor Day holiday coming up on September 2nd. With that, commissioners, we stand. I'll stand for any questions, or if we have time. We're happy to cut cake.
Thanks, Director. We'll be at ease until noon.
Thank you.
That's right, I'm not, what I say is I'm.
Oh, there you go. Okay, that works.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is now 12 o'clock and I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody in person and online joining us. And please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, first order of business is to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, next is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless the commissioners or citizens so request. In
Madam-
which case, the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are considered action items unless noted. If there are no requests to remove anything, I'd entertain a motion.
Madam President, I move to adopt the consent agenda with the exception of referring item 2 back to staff.
Yeah, thank you.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Then that moves us to the regular agenda items. We do not have any. So moving to discussion items and public communications. Do we have anybody in person or online who would like to speak to the commission? Okay, seeing none, we will then adjourn and move to the post-commission agenda. First, we have a work session, VRT, Valley Regional Transit FY25 budget request, presentation by staff, and Tom Latz, welcome.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Tom Laws, Planning Manager with Ada County Highway District. Before you today is the Valley Regional Transit FY 2025 funding request. This item is a routine annually request that all of Valley Regional Transit partners receive. And really what we're looking for today is just a general head nod. If there's support, we'll come back at a later time with consent agenda items for all the agreements. And with me today is Valley Regional Transit CEO Elaine Clegg and Chief Development Officer Stephen Hunt. And I'll go ahead and pass my time on to them for the presentation.
Thank you. Welcome, Elaine.
Good afternoon. It is afternoon, isn't it? It's good to see you all. I'm happy to be here. And as Tom said, this is pretty routine, but it's also an opportunity to update you on some of the things we've been doing over the year. So we'll have recent accomplishments, our development process, and then the special assessment that we're asking you for, what it's tied to, and what that full funding request is. So this year we've had quite a busy year. We had a ridership increase of 10%. We're up over 19% since our lowest during COVID, and we're looking to catch up to where we were pre-COVID by the end of this year. It's looking good for that. We updated all of the signs at all of our stops. I'm sure some of you have seen those out on the roads. It's been very successful. People have responded to it quite well. In addition to that, we updated our route map, as you can see here, as part of the largest service change we've done in over 20 years. And we also have all new brochures. Each of those bus stops now have an information sheet on them. It's information that didn't used to exist at bus stops. So as you're at the stop, you get a QR code, you learn what the fare is, and you can see the stops on that route or routes that are served at that location. Again, really exciting. Our riders have responded to it quite well. That change in service was to focus service on more productive routes. As you can see on this map, there's some green lines. Those green lines are routes that have 20-minute or 15-minute service most of the day. And then we have a lot of blue lines on there. Some of those blue lines are 30-minute service all day, and some are 60-minute service. The other thing we instituted was connecting north-south routes, the Route 20 and the new Route 21, which used to be the 12, connect all the way from north of State Street, either to Town Square Mall or to the airport. It's really been quite well received. On the construction side, we've also been pretty busy. We completed the Orchard parking lot pavement expansion. You guys do a lot of pavement, so you know how much work that is and how exciting it can be to finally get it done. We expanded our construction management team in anticipation of completing the RAISE grant, and we now have 2 low and no emissions grants. So we've got a lot of work on that side. We're also beginning work. We hope by the end of this year on remodeling our Happy Day Transit Center over in Canyon County. We began construction on State Street at State and 18th. Thank you for coordinating with us so that that project and the project at 16th could work in a way that we didn't block all the north-south on that side of the north end at the same time. I think it's going pretty well. If you've been down there, you see we've got most of the demolition work done, and we're now getting into building the new curb structure and the new bus stop platform. We've also completed the NEPA on the State Street corridor for the RAISE grant. So we have NEPA permission to do the work that we identified in the grant. There still may be some cleanup here and there if we have bits of right-of-way that weren't included in the original submission as we get into final design, but for the most part, that NEPA work is done. And we updated our website, which is our piece of infrastructure internally that also serves people. You can see the new signs on this picture and the new sign, the new route information holder on the signpost. So our funding development process, every year we have a cost allocation methodology, and through that we calculate a general assessment, and then we calculate the percentage of that general assessment that should go to our non-municipal partners. In this case, this year, that was 7.53%, which totals $6,266. You all don't have any direct service that you help pay for, nor any capital assessments that you help pay for. When we do capital projects, there are always special assessments, which we negotiate with you. And so this year, in addition to the fee for the PASS program that you pay, and I'll show you that in a minute, there is an assessment for in-kind donation to match a surface transportation block grant to do some of the work at 23rd and 27th on State Street. In this case, replacing the mast arms, which are the old original ITD ones. And we're asking you to pay the 7 3/4% of that project. So the RAISE grant is moving forward. After we complete the work at 18th, we'll finalize the design at 27th. It's in conceptual right now. This completes a portion of the RAISE grant, but not all of it. There's ongoing work further west as we finish projects. We'll move to the next one. And we'd like to begin construction on this particular intersection as soon as possible. As I noted, there was a STBG rebalancing grant that we were able to get, so that as we got into design on that project, we learned that those mast arms really needed replaced and some other work done that we had not anticipated. we were successful in getting this STBG grant to augment the raise funds and replace those signals. There's 843,000 and some federal, and we're asking for ACHD to contribute the 66,794 local in kind as we replace and upgrade those signals. So all in all, the special assessment includes the 2,511 for the ACHD PASS program. If you want information about ridership on that, Stephen has that. And then the in-kind contribution at 23rd and 27th for a grand total of 75,571, which I think has already been programmed into your budget that you'll be hearing next week. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Elaine, are there any questions?
Madam President,
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
my memory doesn't tell me when we had the discussion for the in-kind. I remember that it was held and what the agreement was and why it was agreed to be in-kind instead of cash. So I'm just, do you remember how long ago that was?
Stephen may, I don't remember.
You shouldn't, but Steve probably does.
Yeah. Madam President, members of the commission, when we put together our funding request to Compass, and that was at the beginning of this calendar year, that's when we shared what the cost would be and began conversations on how we would cover the local portion of those STBG grants. So that would be been the beginning of this calendar
Just
year.
this past calendar year, huh?
That's my,
Okay,
yeah,
boy, time flies.
thank you.
Thanks.
Well, you are, I think, are also providing some other in-kind contribution that came last year. So it would be, I couldn't remember either.
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney?
how does this request, excuse me, compare to previous years? You'll have to refresh my memory because I don't recall what the numbers have been in previous years.
Commissioner Gold, Commissioner McKinney, thank you. Last year, the special assessment request was about 240,000, 239 something. It also included work at 27th and 23rd and State. The assessment last year was contribution toward the bicycle and pedestrian improvements that we'll be doing as part of the bus stop improvements on those two, at those two locations. In doing the design on that, we learned this. So I do know the last 2 years have been between that and this. I know that a few years ago, it was a little bit higher as you contributed again to a capital project that benefited pedestrians and bicyclists. And other years it's been lower again because ACHD doesn't make a contribution towards service or ongoing capital. Yours is quite lumpy. It's very every year depending on what projects we have. But the nearly $7,000 general assessment is the one that's steady, and the $2,500 for your PASS program.
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Again, jogging memories. When the assessment in kind has gone way up, it's been like when we've been doing an intersection project on Veterans Parkway or something where there's been some of your facilities that have needed to be accommodated more than on other stretches, correct?
Commissioner Goldthorpe, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Hanson?
Just a couple of questions. How much is the assessment that each of the cities in Ada County,
So
how much do
the-
they contribute to the overall?
The assessments for the cities, rather than being a percentage of the overall, is based on both a percentage and population. So it's varied. Some cities, city of Cuna, for instance, is at around 20,000. City of Boise is, gosh, I couldn't tell you, I think 200 and some thousand. Other cities in between. The city of Middleton is going to contribute this year for the first time in a bit, and their assessment is around the same that yours is, 5,000 or 6,000.
So, and then in addition, some, or is it just one that contributes to operations? I know Boise's is what, north of,
So a number of communities also contribute to operations, Boise, Meridian, Nampa, Caldwell, Eagle to some extent, others in the past, yes and no. CUNA's looking at it. And then when they contribute to operations, we also include a capital component, which is both the buses and the bus facilities that we need to keep up to be able to run those operations.
and those vary from Boise's is what, around 7 million, more than that,
Boise's this year was approaching 10 million.
10 million, okay.
And City of Meridian is approaching 1 million. The others move down from there.
And then with that, you're able to leverage and get the FTA federal grants,
We
roughly
get,
20%, 80% match, is it?
yeah, Commissioner Gold, Commissioner Hanson, it varies depending on the grant and the project. We get about 13 million in local funds and spend about 12 million in federal funds on operating. And the operating match is only 50-50. And in Ada County, it's only up to a certain percentage of our full formula fund. And so in Ada County, actually, the operations end up costing almost all local, 80-20 local versus 50-50 in Canyon County. On the capital side, it's 20-80 mostly, unless we're able to get an STBG grant like this one, and then it becomes 7 3/4. So
Wow.
again, it varies. Our total budget is 35 million. Of that, about 55% is federal, 45% is local. On the operating side, it's just the opposite. Of the 25 million, about 55% is local and 45% is federal.
Great. I just want to say that I think this is an incredibly valuable deal for taxpayers who support Ada County Highway District because it's the right of way that we operate in. And our goal is to help move people in the right of way. And we're not paying to help move people in the right of way by transit. Yeah, I mean, I calculated, I see that what the ask is for this year is less than 0.03% of our budget. And if you looked at our consent agenda, we just approved an item to increase a contract for a design because we need some more money of $85,000. There's $10,000 more than the entire assessment that you're asking this year. So it does an enormous amount. You're able to provide the freedom for people to make some choices in some areas. It would make more sense to us to rethink how the right of way is being used and be more efficient, because it's our job to make the right of way function efficiently to move people. But we've chosen not to do that, both the state and the county level. So I just want to say this is an enormously valuable thing to the taxpayers, that the taxpayers, at least the taxpayers to Ada County, are not picking up, but they're benefiting, especially those that are then given some freedom in their neighborhoods to have choices to ride transit, rather than being forced. And I know in other areas they feel they have no choice. They're forced to only use one mode of transportation. But in those areas that the bus service is provided, they have some freedom. And I think it's an enormously valuable deal. And I wish in future, it would be much more equitable based upon the amount of right of way and how much of the right of way is being used for bus service and so forth. But at this point, it's a teeny tiny bit.
Commissioner Gold, Commissioner Hanson, it's been interesting since I've been in this job. I've learned that the places that have the least service are also the places that seem to have the most issues with congestion. And it isn't surprising to me, but I think continues to be surprising to a lot of people. I do think we do bring a valuable service, and I appreciate you recognizing that. Two things I would note, in this particular case, we were able to bring to the taxpayers of this region almost $1 million, of which you're matching a very small portion, so that we could replace infrastructure that's over 60 years old, that the state put in over 60 years ago on State Street when it was a federal facility or a state facility. And so I do think, that's been a real value to the taxpayers here. I'd also note that I know all of us right now are struggling with budgets, and I think there's an opportunity for us to talk to leadership, both at ACHD and all of the municipalities along State Street, about whether or not it would be worthwhile to begin discussing going after a really large grant and finishing that facility, taking that off of you so that you can spend the monies that you have on those local projects that we know are such high priority to all of our partners. And so I look forward to having that conversation. I think it's possible with really some very small changes in both the policy and the way that we've looked at State Street to date. So be aware that we're going to start those conversations soon and look forward to bringing back to you, I hope, a proposal that would allow you to spend less of the local money on State Street and more of it on those local projects.
Thanks, Elaine. And so just to reiterate what the, it's an in-kind donation for signal infrastructure and it's a match on the block grant. And what intersections is it?
I think specifically both the 23rd intersection and the 27th intersection on State Street, as I understand it, both those mast arms and the light signal boxes and infrastructure are over 60 years old and were installed by the state of Idaho when it was a state facility. And so we'll be replacing those rather than doing all of this construction work and leaving that infrastructure in place that really is past its due date.
And what's the timeline for that?
We hope to begin construction as soon as we finish State and 18th. We're getting very close to final design on the package, and we'll get out to bid as soon as we get that final design done.
So then, and this might be more of a question for Tom, but then next steps would be to kind of get those details in an interagency agreement and bring them back to the commission. Okay.
Yeah, as soon as we get final design, we'll make sure either Tom brings them to you, we bring them to you.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, the next work session is work session 2, Eagle Amity Roundabout presentation. Matt Deacon.
It's not Matt Deacon.
Okay. What does that say?
Commissioners, good afternoon. For the record, Josh Sack, Traffic Engineering Supervisor for ACHD. So I am here to talk about the proposed changes that we're looking at for the Eagle and Amity roundabout. Because I like history, it's always helpful to show a couple of historic slides. It always amazes me when we took historical imagery. I've got 3 different images. One, this was originally an all-way stop controlled intersection dating back to about 2012. That's in the upper left-hand corner right there. Single lane approaches. These are rural arterials up until probably not all that long ago. Upper right-hand corner is the 2012 version of the single lane roundabout when we reconstructed it. Single lane entries, single circulating lanes, not really much in the way of pet facilities because of kind of ongoing development. The only corner that really had any sort of development was that southeast corner, which is the Idaho Power substation. In 2021, we went from that single lane roundabout and reconstructed it as a dual lane roundabout, fully dual lane with southbound bypass lane. RFBs, rectangular rapid flashing beacons at entering and exiting lanes, in addition to 3 of the 4 corners as developed through the development process. So in terms of existing conditions as a dual lane roundabout, we had our friends at Meridian Police Department help us out with the most recent crash history. From October of 21 to May of 23, effectively when we completed construction, we've had 114 reported crashes. I'm not going to minimize that. That's a large number, and it's a larger number than we ever like to see at any intersection. The one advantage, if you can call it that, is that the vast majority of those reported crashes are property damage only, which are if you have to have a crash, those are the crashes we want to see. We don't like to see the ABC fatality type injuries. And of those 114 reported crashes, we can kind of classify 6 to 66, almost half of those as what we call failure to yield. I'll go into that a little bit in a couple of future slides. Amity Road right now, east and west of the roundabout, only has 1 lane and expands two lanes at the intersection, which is what we have. And under current conditions, what we have right now, and the intersection itself, the roundabout operates well under what we would consider kind of full capacity, which for roundabouts itself, that's not always advantageous. When we talk about dominant crash types, we talk about failure to yield. I'm grateful to our friends over in Washington County, Minnesota for these next 2 diagrams because they're very good illustrations as to what we talk about when we talk about sort of failure within a roundabout and failure to yield. So in this case, let's just say, up is north. We have the number 1 right there in purple on that kind of southeast corner. That driver who is about to enter, he can either go straight or he can go through. But number 2, the vehicle that number 1 is supposed to yield to, maybe it's perhaps that number 1 thinks that number 2 is going to automatically make a left turn, when in reality, number 2 can either go through or make a left turn. And he assumes that he's making a left turn, and that's where that angle crash occurs. So as always with roundabouts, it is yield to entry and is yield to all lanes upon entry. And for any sort of dual lane approach, our standard application is to install 2 all lanes signs, which are supplemental plaques that go below the yield signs to indicate to drivers that no matter who's in the lane, who is in the circulating roadway in the roundabout, that a driver upon entry has to yield to them. And this is exactly one of the reasons why. Second dominant crash type is an improper lane use. So in this case, we've got the purple lane up in the upper right-hand corner. When he enters, he can make a right turn or go through. As he circulates, once he enters, he has the right of way. But once he crosses that threshold, he can only go through. He cannot make a left turn through that lane. And oftentimes what we've seen, at least in the crash patterns, is that is sort of a dominant crash type that we're seeing. So somebody who is supposed to go through makes effectively an improper lane use, and he would be cited accordingly. So left turning drivers must be in the left turn. For whatever reason, it's one of those kind of flummoxing things that drivers sort of forget to use those standard the markings. They forget to look at the regulatory signs that says a left driver should be in a left lane, and a through driver should have to look at the pavement markings and the supplemental signs in order to indicate which lane they should be in order to complete their turning maneuver or their through maneuver. What we tend to see is these are the crash types that are most prevalent when there are 2 circulating lanes within the roundabout. So if you have a single circulating lane, this is obviously not as big of a deal because you have fewer choices to make. A driver has fewer choices to make once they enter. So in lieu of all this, or in looking at some of the crash data, we're looking at some interim safety treatments. The first one we're going to be looking at is installing rectangular rapid flashing beacons across the southbound channelized right turn lane. So I know that a couple of the neighbors, a couple of area residents have expressed concerns. That is the only portion of this roundabout that is not pedestrian, that does not have a pedestrian actuated device. And if we go back in the history, we actually do have a conduit that goes across that we call it a free right turn. There's about 14 to 15 feet of pavement to cross, single direction, designed for 20 to 25 miles an hour. It's about as kind of reasonable as a crossing as one can expect at a roundabout, but we still plan on installing supplemental devices for pedestrians to kind of ease that transition, especially with the Albertsons on that northwest corner now. The other thing we're looking at is installing rubber curb to limit the eastbound and westbound legs to 1 circulating lane through the roundabout. So what this does, it's a curb, and we'll go into some of the details for some of the products we're looking at. These are curb bolts. If we've seen the Ziklas out there, they're like little rubberized, kind of call them armadillos, or just a rubberized device that we can actually bolt into the pavement that we can use to extend the splitter island. And I'll go into a couple of little details about that. We can remove them relatively easily should Amity be widened, or if we need to do so for capacity's sake. And then, of course, along with this, we'll plan on revising some of the entry signage and the markings to better reflect what the geometry is going to change to. So there's where we plan on installing the RFBs for those 2 crossings right there. And then here's where we plan on making some of those changes to kind of restrict the number of lanes that actually traverse, or the number of circulating lanes through the roundabout. And then some of the revised markings too upon approach on Amity. So real quick for RFB installation, rectangular rapid flashing beacon, we've got a bunch of them. I mean, we've actually got, I think, almost close to 90 right now. There's a lot of research that says they are extremely effective. And the research that we've done here and all the studies that we've accomplished throughout our county kind of validates exactly what FHWA has told us, that these are valuable devices and they get drivers to yield at a much higher rate of kind of in the right environment when we do install them. So we plan on installing the RFBs at those 2 locations. That's kind of an example of still what they look like. See them all throughout the county, they should be pretty familiar. So we talk about engineered rubberized curb. These do extend the splitter islands kind of right here. We're going to be limiting east-west circulating traffic through the roundabout to 1 single lane. Because Amity only has a single lane eastbound, westbound, we're not talking much in terms of kind of operational changes, but what it does is sort of simplifies the movement itself. So that drivers who are in the leftmost lane are the ones who are going to be circulating through. Oops, sorry about that. And then the right lane as you're approaching the roundabout will be converted to a right turn only lane. Still yield to entry. That does not change the operation of the intersection itself. It's still yield to entry. What this does is it reduces the risk for the prominent crash types that we've already established. And it also preserves capacity for the heaviest traffic movements, and those are the through movements. So in terms of engineers rubberized curb, there are a lot of products out there. We haven't quite determined exactly what it's going to look like, but it's going to look something like this. This is just one example. They tend to be up 4 to 6 inches in height, sectional. They bolt into the pavement. We have experience in installing these already at other locations, not for this specific location, certainly, but it's going to be a very similar application. Temporary installation, they can be removed and adjusted if needed. If we don't get the geometry quite right, it's pretty easy to adjust them if we need to. If they're going to be white for the outside circulating lane, we're going to include some sort of raised delineator and about 18 inches or so in height to be able to ease our maintenance burden. And if there's snow removal necessary, operators can see them pretty easily. For land use modifications, I kind of went over that already, but we're going to preserve northbound and southbound Eagle Road in its current configuration. We're not really seeing a huge number of problems. A lot of the problems tend to occur with Amity more so than Eagle Road. And again, kind of converting that outside eastbound and westbound lane to right turn only, right about there. It's going to look very similar to other roundabouts in the vicinity, 10 Mile in Amity, 10 Mile in Victory. It's not going to be unfamiliar to drivers, at least certainly area drivers. It's pretty standard stuff. We don't expect a huge change in driver behavior as a consequence of this. And again, it can be easily modified if we need to accommodate traffic demand, because things are changing out here with relative quickness. In terms of kind of what we're looking at for timeline, we have internal staff that is familiar with sort of thing. We can put together a design this fall, largely with internal staff, looking at probably construction in winter and spring, with the total cost kind of in that $100,000 range. So it's a relatively interim approval at a relatively good cost. And I'll stand for any questions.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Well, I'll personally be very grateful when this is completed, having watched the confusion that exists, because folks, number one, won't slow down in that roundabout. You've probably seen that or heard that. And they're just not watching out for other people. And so whatever we can do to help with pedestrians and make it at least physically more difficult to mess up, that's going to be great.
Mr. Goldharp, thank you. That's a good comment.
Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, I do recall. Obviously, you may recall, I didn't support the design of this roundabout with a free running right turn. I hate to say I told you so. This is an example. And I think we should get rid of all the free running right turns on roundabouts. They're dangerous. The other thing, of course, is there's few crossings leading up to this roundabout on both Amity and Eagle. So drivers aren't used to seeing pedestrians crossing before they get to this roundabout. So they're going too fast. And you know, there was no mention of what the LTS is here. I assume it's bad. It's bad in other places along both of these arterials. But this is what happens. We have to spend more money to retrofit safety that we know is going to be a problem. So, and I certainly hope that we get rid of the free running right turn on this and all other intersections, not just roundabouts, but actual intersections, all over the place. Thanks.
Madam President,
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
one of the things that I have noticed the most about this particular roundabout are the problems that have occurred. Haven't been just accidentally, they've been intentional. I mean, people go through that roundabout at much higher rates of speed than they know is safe, and they do it intentionally. And during the peak hours, it's the worst. Sometimes going east and west there, it's virtually impossible to enter the roundabout because of that. And the lack of courtesy is just absolutely amazing. So again, whatever we can do, and it isn't, you know, I haven't seen any problems having to do with the right turn there heading west, but all kinds of other problems that we've discussed today already. None accidental. Thanks.
The $100,000, is this under the rapid project implementation kind of allocation or?
Commissioner Gold, I don't think we have that answer right now. There's a lot of ways we're working with our capital projects folks and potentially maintenance. I mean, one idea could be to integrate this into our Amity and Lake Hazel project. Certainly if we have lane restrictions on Amity to the south, that reduces the amount of traffic that's going to be going through there. So that's a relatively opportune time to address some of these proposals. So we're looking at a couple different options.
Then I assume we'll have some kind of public communications that will help notify folks that these changes, I'm getting a nod over there, so.
Short answer, yes.
Commissioner McKinney, did you have anything? No, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all. So we'll see y'all next week. Thank you.